the one skill that can completely transform and revolutionize our lives is usually the one skill that nobody teaches us when we're growing up. And on today's episode, we're gonna learn about how we can master this skill so that we can learn how to master our lives. So if you're ready to learn with me, let's dive in. What's going on? Welcome back to the Life Recreated channel. My name is Nick. I'm an emotional intelligence coach, helping individuals to learn how to fully feel so they can learn how to fully live. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the skill of learning how to master our emotions. You know, when you think about when we grew up, most of the people that grew up around us, I don't know, that was my experience, didn't really teach me or didn't teach us how to master our emotions, how to take all these different feelings, how to take all these different things happening within our lives and happening within our internal world and learning how to process those things and learning how to actually have them benefit us and actually help us along the way. So on today's episode, I'm going to really dive into a framework that I've been using for the last year, which I call the 4I feeling framework. And it's 4 steps that is based off of 4 questions that can help us to learn how to take the emotions that we're feeling when they do come up and use them in a constructive way. See, the challenge that we have with our emotions is that a lot of times nobody gave us a framework. Nobody gave us some different steps that we can use, that we can take these emotions and take these feelings and use them in more of a constructive way rather than them being destructive. And so let's dive into these 4 steps when we talk about the 4I feeling framework. Number 1, what we need to do is we need to learn how to identify. I always say it like this: if you can't name it, I can't know how to act. And so what this really talks about is the fact that many times you and I, we haven't been given the tools that we need or the names that we need for a lot of the emotions that we're feeling. You know, I was with a client the other day working with this team, and we were working through a situation that he was having and some of the feelings that he was going through when it came to this situation. It was something where, like folks in the house were like frustrated. And you remember those times, right? When we're a teen, we're in the house, our parents might be bothering us, our siblings might be bothering us, everybody else in the house might be just upsetting us. And so as I was talking with him, I was trying to get him to understand, or I was trying to get him to identify exactly what he was feeling. I was trying to get him to name exactly what he was feeling. So he gave me the scenario. He said, it was a situation where he was, needing to use the restroom, and every time he got to go to the bathroom, somebody's in there, right? We know how that goes, right? That's frustrating. And if you had a sibling, you know how that goes. And so he's there and he's like, I get frustrated in those moments. I get angry in those moments. And I said, okay, well, let's take a look and let's really identify what the actual feeling is during that time. And so we kind of went through a couple things. I used an app. I called it the How We Feel app. I'll make sure I link that in the description below. Wonderful app to help you to learn how to identify your emotions. And so as we were sitting and we were looking at this app, we were looking at this whole buffet of emotions. And he realized that the feeling that he was having during that time was a feeling of contempt, meaning that he had like this anger and this disgust towards this individual that was in his house using the bathroom when he wanted to use it. And so as I pulled that up and I showed it to him, we were reading the definition and he said, oh, wow, I didn't realize that this was the name of what that emotion was that I was feeling at that time. And so what we have to do when we start off learning how to use this framework and learning how to master our emotions is really learning how to identify the emotions that we're feeling. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of different emotions that you and I can feel. But oftentimes when we grow up, we only learn a small handful of these different emotions. We only learn maybe anger, happiness, sadness, whatever it might be. It's just this small little pool of emotions that we get to choose from. The problem with that is that when we don't know how to identify and name these emotions, it really limits us to understanding what is going on inside of us. See, when we learn how to identify our emotions, when we learn how to put a name to those emotions, then I know, especially as a man, I know now how I can act and how I can move forward when I have those feelings and when I have those emotions. See, learning how to identify those emotions, it teaches us that we're more than just a few feelings. It teaches us here that we're more than just, one or two different things that we're feeling throughout the day. We're more than just anger. We're more than just, happiness. We're more than just sadness. The way that God has designed us and created us is to know and to understand that we have this whole buffet from emotions that comes up and that we can feel. And when we can learn how to really put a name to those emotions, it can help us to learn how to act. Now, before I move on to the next one, I want to let you know about a guide that I created. It's a guide called Mastering Your Emotions. It's a 14-step guide. I'm going to make sure I link it down in the description below, but it'll help you to understand how to take some of these different skills and go through some of these different steps on learning how to master our emotions. So make sure you check that out and grab it in the link in the description below. Next, we got to learn how to invite these emotions. I'm going to speak from the perspective of a man here, right? When I think about my emotions and when I think about the feelings that I grew up with and the feelings that I have on a day-to-day basis, oftentimes we weren't taught that those emotions were allowed, especially as men. Feelings of sadness, feelings of insecurity, feelings of whatever it may be. There were so many emotions that we were taught growing up, and it could have been through somebody specifically saying that we're not allowed to feel like that. Think about boys, think about little boys. We're told, hey, what are you crying for? I remember hearing oftentimes growing up, if you're crying, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. It was like all these emotions that we were having during that time. It seemed like the folks that were around us, our parents, our guardians, whatever it may have been, it seems like those individuals didn't want to allow us to feel the emotions that we were feeling. And I think, and this is my personal opinion, a lot of times that happens because when we're younger and we're having all these emotions come up, the people that are bringing us up, our parents, they were never allowed to experience those emotions. They were never allowed to express and feel those emotions fully. So when they come up in us, it scares them because they're like, oh, shoot, why are you crying? Why are you feeling this way? Why are you having all these different things? And so our second step and our second key in mastering our emotions is learning how to invite those emotions in. And the question that I always ask in this situation is, will I allow myself to feel this way? Will I allow these emotions to run their course and for me to really sit with those emotions? Now, that could be a difficult and a challenging process for us, because what if emotions come up? What if feelings come up that are intense, that are overwhelming? I've sat down and I mentioned this before on some of my other videos, but I had the opportunity to be a counselor at a cemetery. So I'm sitting here with men and women that have had somebody that is close to them that has passed away. And I want to tell you, when you're sitting down at that table with somebody, there are some emotions that come up that you're like, dang, I don't know if I really want to feel this. And I'm not even the one that has somebody that has somebody to pass away, but just being in that room with somebody and being in those moments with somebody, it's a challenging situation because there are so many things that are coming up that you're just like, man, I don't know if I can, really want to sit here in this. But part of the key to us learning how to master these emotions is allowing those emotions to come and being willing to sit with those emotions. There's a term that's used for what I feel like a lot of us as men, we do with our emotions, is that we repress our emotions. And what that means is that these are times when we will unconsciously avoid the feelings that are coming up, unconsciously push down and push aside these emotions because we're not willing to invite them in, and we're not willing to allow them to be, or allow ourselves to experience and allow ourselves to go through the process of it. For men, a lot of times there's certain emotions that we're socially taught are unacceptable, that are emotions that we're not allowed to feel and that we're not allowed to have. But here's the thing with that. If that was the case, then why would God give all of us these emotions? Why would God give women these emotions? Why would God give mend these emotions. I mean, think about it. Why would God give us all these different emotions if we weren't allowed and if we weren't supposed to be able to feel them and deal with those emotions? And so here we are in that second step, is being able for us to learn how to invite and allow those emotions to come into our existence and to come into our experience. The third step we need to do is we need to learn how to investigate. We need to learn how to investigate. And this is the question that I ask: why am I feeling this way? What is happening in my external world that's causing me to feel this way internally? What's happening within all that's going on around me? Who is around me? Where am I at? What time of the day is it? What did somebody else do? What did this person around me do that has triggered this emotion in me? See, because emotions, and this is what we got to realize, this I want you to get, emotions are clues. Emotions help us to understand what's going on in our environment, but they're triggers that happen to us internally. So there's a few things that we got to keep in mind when we start investigating. I always say it like this, and this was my process that I learned. I had to learn how to not be a judge and rather be a detective. I had to learn how to stop judging my emotions, learn how to start digging into and investigating why I was feeling a certain way and why these emotions were coming up. See, because our emotions, they're all these clues around us, and they can help us to understand what my environment's telling me. They can help you to understand what your relationship is telling me. If I'm with my significant other, my partner, my kids, whatever the case may be, if I'm with those individuals and these emotions are starting to come up, I started to realize that those emotions are trying to tell me something is happening here. Something is going on here. There's something in this situation. There's something in this environment. There's something in the way that these people are acting, or the way that I'm acting, or the things that I'm experiencing that are causing these emotions to come up. So I start investigating. So there's a few things that we got to keep in mind when we think about investigating our emotions. Number one, emotions are not good or bad. Emotions aren't good or bad. Now, most of us, we've been trained that certain emotions that we feel are bad emotions, right? If I feel sad about something, that's a bad emotion, right? If I feel angry about how somebody wronged me or insecurity that comes up, that's a bad emotion. But here's the thing with emotions. Emotions aren't right or wrong. Emotions are not a moral issue. You know, if you grew up in a household that was predominantly religious, I grew up in the South. I grew up in South Florida, right? My father used to be a pastor. My mom was they're very religious, very into the Word of God, and so am I right now. But I think that when we grow up in some of those atmospheres, the things that we feel and the emotions that come up within us, they cause us to want to try and place like this moral or immoral judgment on this, right? Let's say somebody does me wrong and somebody just, infuriates me, and this emotion comes up like, I want to hurt this person. Like I really want to just put my hands on them, hurt them, and really let them feel the pain that I'm feeling because of what they did. I personally believe that emotion is not wrong. It's what I do after that is an issue. It's my action and my response to that emotion that could be an issue. And that's what's going to determine whether or not what I do is right or wrong, not necessarily the feeling that I'm having in that moment, because I can have the feelings, right? And this is why we need to learn how to master our emotions, is because I can have the feeling, but what am I doing after I have the feeling? That's really the issue that we need to learn. And that's what we're trying to learn how to master in our lives, is that when these emotions come up, what am I doing? What's the next step? Where am I going after this? How am I responding to this, right? So in that investigation phase, we need to understand that it's a phase where I'm able to really dig in and start learning how to understand why I'm feeling this way and what's going on internally. And here's what I learned in this situation and learned in my own experience with this. When I started becoming an investigator and I really started investigating and becoming a detective and allowing these emotions to give me clues, I started seeing patterns in my life. I started noticing that certain times of the day I would feel a certain way. I started noticing that when I would get around certain individuals or be around certain people, it would make me feel a certain way. I started understanding that, like certain things would trigger me. And then I started making notes of that. I started becoming a detective and I started realizing like, okay, around 2:00 in the afternoon, I start feeling certain what's happening there that's causing me to feel like that. And as I began to start being this detective, I began to start understanding that there is a way for me to be able to fashion my life, to navigate through the world so that when these emotions come up, I can respond and I can behave in a way that's positive and gets me closer to my goals. And so investigating is a huge part of what we need to do in that third step. Fourth step, final step is this, is that lastly, we need to learn how to integrate. What do I mean by integrate? Well, what I mean by integrate is that when I have an emotion and I have a feeling that comes up internally, I have to learn how to take that emotion. I have to learn how to understand what that emotion is telling me. And I have to learn how to integrate what it is that I'm feeling internally with the world around me externally in a constructive way that's going to bring me closer to my goals. In a way that's going to bring me maybe closer to the people that I love, maybe in a way that's going to get me closer to the things that I desire. See, because here's the challenge that we have, I feel like, with emotions sometimes. When emotions come up, because we're not aware of what's happening, oftentimes we just respond. We just act, right? We react rather to those emotions. And if we be honest, there's a lot of times when these emotions come up and we react and they don't give us the goal that we wanted in our lives. I mean, there's so many examples that we can use. You think about when you get into an argument with your spouse or with your partner and they make you mad, you're angry, you feel that emotion coming up, it's there, and you want to say something that you know you ain't supposed to be saying. Because we know that there's these things that we have within us that if we say it in a certain way, we mention that certain thing, it's gonna be something that brings up some tension or brings up some hurt in another individual. And that's what I'm talking about here, is that there are these emotions that come up, and because we're not aware of how we're supposed to integrate those emotions, my internal world with my external world in a way that's constructive, we end up doing things that are destructive and end up hurting us and taking us farther away from the things that we really want. See, it's not how you feel, but it's what you decide to do with what you're feeling. That's the main thing. And I always ask myself the question, how am I going to use this emotion? How am I going to use this tool of what I'm feeling in a constructive way? It could be with my kids. My kids might be, ticking me off. They're running around. They're doing all these different things. I feel this agitation. I feel this irritation. I see it come up. I know that it's there. I invite it into my life. I start investigating. I realize, okay, the reason I'm feeling irritated is because they're running around. But really, the reason I'm feeling irritated is because I might be pressured at work. I might have these deadlines going on. So there's all these things building up. Now, if I don't learn how to integrate that in a constructive way with my external world, what might come out is me yelling something at my kids. It might be me saying something that hurts their feelings or damages our relationship. And over time, we know that those little damages, those little hits that we take in our relationship, they add up and they accumulate over time. So what I'm talking about with integrating is learning how to understand what it is that I'm feeling, learn how to take that emotion and learning how to really process and say, okay, I understand now, this is why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. I've investigated this. I've taken that time to see what's going on here. And now I'm going to integrate the way that I'm feeling in a positive, constructive way with my external world. This one little thing right here, I believe, can change all of our relationships. That's just my belief. If I could take that one split second to understand what it is I'm feeling, invite it in, understand why I'm feeling that way, and then take that split second to decide how am I going to integrate this constructively in the rest of my world around me, this can change everything. And I think this is why emotional intelligence becomes a huge part in leadership, in our development with our relationships, in our development with our relationship with our kids, in our relationship with money. This one little split second here is asking, how am I going to use this emotion and integrate it in a constructive way with my external world, can change everything. Because like I said, it's not how I'm feeling, it's what I do with how I'm feeling that matters. It's not necessarily the emotion that is an issue. It's my actions that I take afterwards. How am I integrating this emotion and this feeling with the rest of the world? So as we land the plane this morning, I want to say this. There's a few things that we need to remember here. Number one, it takes time. This is a skill, just like any other skill. It's just like working out. I used to lift a lot. I used to, be into lifting and weightlifting and all those different things. And one of the things that I realized that over time, in order for me to get stronger, it takes time. It takes time for me to lift these weights. It takes time for me to get in the gym. It takes time for me to be consistent. It takes time for me to eat healthy. It takes time for me to do all these things so I can get the results that I want to get. So when it comes to mastering your emotions, I want you to remember that this takes time. This is a skill that we got to develop. When I started working on this and I started using this in my own life, it took time for me to understand, and I'm still trying to figure it out. There's still emotions that come up almost on a daily basis where I'm like, yo, where did that come from? I don't even know what to name that. I don't even know why I'm feeling that way. I don't even know all these things. And so it is a skill that is going to take time. And then lastly, we got to remember that our emotions, they're not the enemy. Our emotions aren't the enemy. If we use them in a constructive way, they will ultimately serve us. If we learn how to work with this framework, if we learn how to work with this feeling framework in our life, every time an emotion comes up, we can learn how to use them, and so that we can master all these different areas in our lives. I don't know about you, but at the end of the day, I want better relationships. I want a better relationship with my wife. I want a better relationship with my kids. I want a better relationship with my friends. I want a better relationship with my work and those that I interact with at work. And so I want those things in my life. And if I understand that the way and the key for me to be able to enjoy those things, to be able to experience the goodness that those things bring, it's going to take me learning how to master these emotions in our life. So I want to hear from you. Drop down in the comments below. Which one of these steps is the biggest challenges for you? Is it learning how to identify your emotions? Is it learning how to invite and sit with those emotions and being able to take those emotions in and sit with them in your life? Is it learning how to investigate, really learning how to pay attention to what's going on around me, what's going on inside me? Or is it lastly learning how to integrate these emotions, these feelings with my external world in a constructive way rather than a destructive way? Let me know down below which is a challenge for you. And if you're trying to learn how to master your emotions, like I said, I'm going to make sure that I put a link in the description below for a guide that I've created called Mastering Your Emotions, 14 steps of things that you can just do, real simple things that can help you to learn how to master your emotions over time. But this has been Nick with Life Recreated. Until next time, keep learning, keep healing, and keep growing. Peace.